So anybody recently who's ever bought a home, like recently, and you didn't get $25,000, man, it sucks to be you, doesn't it? What a total loser. And you just wasted $25,000. Wow. Any atypical disruption of a market. No definition for those terms. The FTC could just decide and do whatever it wants with any metric it deems appropriate. It is insane.
During the primaries, 46,000 Minnesotans voted saying that they wanted the war in Gaza to stop, right? And we know that those people may not even show up to the polls in November.
Oh! Kamala is out. They came out with a new proposal today. Apparently, they're going to say, we're going to give people $25,000 in a down payment if you're a first-time homeowner. So anybody recently who's ever bought a home, like recently, and you didn't get $25,000, man, it sucks to be you, doesn't it? What a total loser. And you just wasted $25,000. Wow. So I guess we don't get that benefit, but new people do. So first-time homeowners, 25 grand, here you go. With more generous support for first-generation homeowners. Great. So like illegal immigrants who just came across, first generation in America. So sorry, American citizens. Sucks to suck. Kamala Harris is going to now give $25,000 to new homeowners, which means I think everybody's just going to raise their prices $25,000, obviously. And just go, yeah, we're just going to, okay, well, so the entire market is just going to shift north and it's not going to matter at all, but all right. She'll announce it tomorrow in North Carolina. She's also saying that they would provide working families who paid for their rent on time for 2 years assistance buying their first home, $25,000 down payment, more generous support for first generation homeowners, whatever that means. Now, more on Harris's housing plan. Calls for construction of 3 million new housing units, which will just be a fraction of the illegals they've brought in. Tax incentives for building starter homes, I guess, like pods. Lower rent by taking on corporate and major landlords, and stop Wall Street investors from buying up and marking up homes in bulk. All right, Harris will also propose a $40 billion fund. She's also, been responsible for other like broadband funds that have totally failed to help local governments find solutions to the lack of housing supply. Expands on a similar $20 billion fund proposed by Biden. This will actually increase prices for everyone because all homes will go up. People who haven't bought at least somewhat successful in their lives will be punished. Exactly right. So while those who have probably not been successful will be rewarded. Exactly right. Shout out to John Ziegler on that one. Yeah, and that's a good comment. Exactly right. If you saved your $25,000 and worked your butt off, what a sucker we are. So that's Kamala, and people even at the Washington Post are calling her kind of a communist. Here's this one that came out from Catherine Rampell, and she says, here's an opinion piece, says, if your opponent is going to call you a communist, you may not want to do communistic things. Just a thought. Hard to exaggerate how bad Kamala's price gouging proposal is. What? From the Washington Post? She says price gouging, okay, is the focus of Kamala's economic agenda. Her presidential campaign says that she'll crack down on, quote, excessive prices and excessive corporate profits, like at the grocery store where margins are like 1%, like no joke. So what level counts as excessive, you might ask? Well, TBD, but Harris is going to ban it. Whatever the hell she wants is the problem. It's kind of like that, like this thing that some people enjoy. You know it when you see it, which is what the Supreme Court said. It's like obscenity is really what we're talking about, which was the Supreme Court standard, which goes back to an old legal case. But it's not hard to figure out where this proposal came from, okay? Voters want someone to blame for high grocery bills. We know who it is. The government, not the corporations, not the farmers, not the people who drive the food, not the people who sell the food. It's everything is inflated because our monetary system is being debased in real time. And the presidential candidates have decided the choices are either the Biden administration or corporate greed. Harris has chosen the latter because she can't admit that she did this. Literally, like she was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which injected over $1 trillion into the economy needlessly. Now, in a news release on Wednesday, her campaign said that the first 100 days of her presidency would include, quote, the first ever federal ban on price gouging on food and groceries, where the margins are like 1%, 3% max, already being squeezed. Everybody. That's why there's shrinkage and all sorts of stuff. Setting clear rules of the road to make clear that big corporations can't unfairly exploit consumers to run up excessive corporate profits on food and groceries. So they'll put price controls in and then there'll be shortages. Now, what are these, quote, clear rules of the road? No one knows. Or the thresholds that determine when a price or profit level becomes excessive? No one knows. Memo doesn't say. The campaign did not answer any questions that Catherine sent seeking clarification. The most likely template for the proposal is a recent bill by Elizabeth Warren. Warren's bill would ban, quote, any grossly excessive price, whatever that means, and any atypical disruption of a market. No definition for those terms. The FTC could just decide and do whatever it wants with any metric it deems appropriate. It is insane. It's it's actually quite scary, right? Because this could happen overnight. It's hard to exaggerate how bad this policy is, she says. Amazing. It is, in all but name, a sweeping set of government-enforced price controls across every industry. Not only food. Supply and demand would no longer determine prices or profits. Far off Washington bureaucrats would. The FTC would be able to say, tell a Kroger in Ohio what it can charge for milk. At best, it would lead to shortages, black markets, hoarding, starvation, millions dead. Other communists have done this. Among other distortions seen previous times that countries tried to limit growth by fiat, there's a reason that narrowing, quote, price gouging laws that exist in the U.S. states are rarely invoked. At worst, it might accidentally raise prices because then the government comes in and they say, wow, these prices are too high. We are going to make it more efficient. How are we going to make it more efficient? Well, we're going to hire all these people, and all these people are going to gouge the government and actually do a worse job because they're morons and they're working with government bureaucrats, and so things become less efficient, more expensive, and there's shortages and increased costs. So that's because, among other things, the legislation would ban companies from offering lower prices to big customers like Costco than to Joe's Corner Store, which means quantity discounts don't happen, right? So everything goes up. Worse, it would require public companies to publish detailed internal data about costs, margins, contracts, pricing strategies. The government's in charge of your business now. Posting costs and pricing plans publicly is a fantastic way for collusion to happen at behest of the government. Now, normally the government doesn't like collusion. Yeah, right. They do. There's a big collusion themselves. In fact, the Harris campaign statement about her anti-price gouging agenda highlights a case that she won against price fixing for LCD flat screens. Price fixing is already illegal, and it should be, but that's not what we're talking about. Harris's economic advisors are either too confused or too lazy to tell the difference. It's important to distinguish cartel behavior versus spikes in prices and profits due to supply and demand. They don't know the difference or the history between these two things. They don't even seem familiar with what's happening to grocery prices, where the battle against inflation has, believe it or not, already been won. Grocery price inflation is coming down since it surged back in the pandemic. On Wednesday, government reports showed that grocery prices in July were up a measly 1% for last year, and indeed annual grocery price inflation has hovered around that level for quite some time. So what's actually happened with grocery inflation? Strong demand plus other supply chain disruptions. And here's more to the point. If your opponent is calling you a communist, don't act like a communist. All right. And it's really a scary thing. I mean, what if there's a wave, Kamala comes in, Democrats win, the houses, they put all these price controls in place. Our market communist economy like that overnight. And there's a strong likelihood that people starve to death. Like, no joke. All right. So you can see that next week when the DNC is in full Democrat mode, just really enjoying themselves. Well, what's going to be interesting is there should be some peaceful protesters there, and there should be some people like this woman who are pretty unhappy with the Democratic Party. And as we've already explained, we support all peaceful protesters at the DNC, both sides, and we think that they should make their voices heard because this is the time to do it. This is their party nomination. So they have to make sure that their voices is represented in the person that they're nominating. And so here's a little bit of a conversation from this woman who says, listen, things are going to be a little spicy over here.
Governor Walz has been pretty clear in his support for Israel in the past. And we know that. In the past, he has refused to meet with Palestinian families who want to talk about Gaza. He has refused to divest from Israeli bonds and banks. And we know that. We do want to meet with the vice president because she's shown a willingness to learn and to move. And we know that Tim Walz has obviously done a little bit of the same. We know right now, going into November, that we cannot win this election without the nearly 1 million voters who voted alongside us during the primaries. During the primaries, 46,000 Minnesotans voted saying that they wanted the war in Gaza to stop, right? And we know that those people may not even show up to the polls in November. They have no reason to show up.
That's right.
If there is no ceasefire and no arms embargo by November.
Yeah, they should be outraged. They should stay home for sure and not show up to the polls because things are ridiculous and the Democratic Party doesn't represent them. So here is now Tulsi, who was responsible for really going after Kamala back during her time running for the presidency when she failed epically. This is what she says about her capabilities being an empty suit.
Just want to play this clip of you on stage with Kamala Harris from, I guess it's 4 or 5 years ago now, and ask you a very specific question about this exchange. Roll it here.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
I am proud of that work, and I am proud of making a decision to not just give fancy speeches or be in a legislative body and give speeches on the floor, but actually doing the work.
The bottom line is, Senator Harris, when you are in a position to make a difference and an impact in these people's lives, you did not. And the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
So that was quite the moment, July of 2019.
That was great.
You gave an interview to the AP saying all you had to do was Google that information and that you were surprised that her comeback was not more effective. What do you mean by that?
Well, she really didn't have a comeback. I think she revealed in that debate the same thing that I think her campaign handlers are worried about right now is, you know, Kamala Harris is an empty suit. They are trying to create this new version of Kamala Harris to match what their pollsters are telling them so she can say whatever she needs to say to try to win over voters, which is the most offensive thing, I think, because they think we're so stupid as to forget what her record actually is.
The left doesn't care.
You know, in 2019, very simply, I confronted her with her hypocrisy, how what she said was very different than what she actually did. And she had no answer for it. She had no explanation. She didn't even try to own or justify what her actions were. And that's going to be the key thing here for voters as we head into this election is, you know, Kamala Harris will say whatever she thinks she needs to say. We have to pay attention to her actions because on every single major issue, you will see that same kind of hypocrisy that I pointed out in 2019, where she'll say one thing, but her record tells a very, very different story.
Well, she's got...
Yeah, we'll see it, but the left doesn't care. Like, they know that she's authentic, very authentically liberal, and so she just has to say what she has to say to get elected, and they'll deal with it after the fact.